Welcome back, chosen family. Before anything else, we owe you something honest. It has been a while since a new message reached you from this channel. Longer than we wanted, longer than felt right. Some things happened behind the scenes that kept us from showing up for you the way we always promised we would. And that silence was never about you. It was never because we forgot you. We didn't. We thought about you every single day we couldn't post. Every day this channel sat quiet when it should have been speaking directly to you. So thank you for waiting. Thank you for still being here when you didn't have to be. And know this, the uploads are back, steady, regular, and they are not stopping again. Now, let's get into what you came here for. Chosen one, sit with this. The people who hurt you when you were just a child, small, still learning how the world worked, still trusting the ones who were supposed to protect you, they are not getting away with it. Not anymore. Every time they raised their voice at something that didn't deserve it. Every time they made you feel like a burden instead of a blessing. Every time they looked right through you, like your feelings didn't matter, like your fear was an inconvenience, like your tears were a performance instead of a plea. That bill, chosen one, that bill just came due. And it's collecting with interest. You were small then. You had no power, no platform, no adult in the room willing to say what you already knew was true. You had to swallow it. You had to shrink to survive it. You had to smile at dinner tables that should have felt safe and didn't. You had to learn how to read a room before you learned how to read a book, how to predict a mood swing before you understood what a mood swing even was. And they counted on one thing, the same thing every person who hurts a child counts on. They counted on you forgetting. They counted on time erasing it, on you growing up too busy, too distracted, too over it, to remember what they did in rooms they thought no one would ever revisit. They were wrong. You didn't forget 1 second of it. And chosen one, neither did the universe. There is a kind of silence a child learns to carry. The kind that isn't peace, it's survival. You carried that silence for years, maybe so long you forgot you were even carrying it. Maybe so long it started to feel like personality instead of protection. But silence like that doesn't disappear. It waits. It gathers. It sits quietly in the corners of who you are until the day it's finally safe enough to speak. And when it finally speaks, it doesn't whisper. It arrives like weather nobody can outrun. What you're about to hear today isn't revenge dressed up as spirituality. It's simply what happens when the universe finishes counting. Maybe you've spent years wondering if you were remembering it wrong, if you were being too sensitive, if maybe it really wasn't as bad as it felt in your body every single time it happened. That doubt was planted on purpose. People who hurt children are rarely careless about it. They are strategic. They know exactly how to make a child question their own reality so thoroughly that even decades later, that child, now an adult, still hesitates before calling it what it actually was. You are allowed to stop hesitating today. You are allowed to call it exactly what it was, without softening it for anyone's comfort, without managing anyone else's feelings about your own history. And chosen one, that permission you're giving yourself right now, that alone is already shifting something in the air around them, whether they can name it or not. Before we go further, if this is already sitting heavy in your chest, that's your sign to stay. Hit like, hit subscribe, and let this message travel to the next chosen one who needs to hear it. Not as a favor to us, as a signal to the universe that you're ready for what comes next. Now, let's begin. Number 1. They thought a child forgets. You remembered every single second. They built their entire escape plan on one lazy assumption, that a child's memory fades faster than an adult's guilt. That's the lie they told themselves at night so they could sleep. That's the excuse they whispered to each other when your name came up and something uncomfortable flickered behind their eyes. A kid won't remember. A kid will grow up and move on. A kid will thank us one day for being tough on them. Chosen one, you didn't move on. You moved forward, which is a very different thing. You carried every dismissed tear, every slammed door, every time you were told to stop crying before you even understood why you were crying in the first place. You remembered the tone of voice before you remembered the words. You remembered the exact hallway you were standing in when you first realized no one was coming to help you. You remembered the silence after, the kind that told you asking again wouldn't change anything. And here's what they never accounted for. A child who isn't allowed to process pain out loud doesn't lose that pain. They just store it somewhere safer, somewhere quieter, somewhere it can wait until it's finally strong enough to be believed. That place was you. You became the archive they thought would stay empty. Imagine someone locking a door, walking away, and assuming that whatever's behind it will just quietly rot into nothing. That's what they believed about your memory. Instead, what was behind that door grew clearer with every year, sharper, more detailed, more undeniable, the way old photographs sometimes develop more color the longer you look at them. They didn't erase anything. They preserved it perfectly, sealed it in a version of you that refused to let the truth die just because it was inconvenient for them. You might ask yourself why you remember so much when everyone else in the family seems to remember so little. It's simple. You were the one it happened to. Nobody forgets their own history. Not really. They just get tired of fighting to be believed, so they go quiet about it. And now that you're standing here, calm, aware, no longer small, no longer afraid to name what happened, they're realizing their biggest miscalculation. They didn't get away with anything. They just got a head start on being wrong for longer. The clock they thought was on their side was never on their side at all. It was simply giving you time to grow tall enough to finally be heard. Think about that for a second, chosen one. Every year that passed wasn't a year they got away with it. It was a year you got closer to language for it, closer to context for it, closer to a life stable enough to finally look back and say, clearly, without apologizing for saying it, that was not okay, and it was never my fault. That clarity was never available to the small version of you standing in that hallway. It had to be built, year by year, and now that it exists, it cannot be taken back from you by anyone, no matter how loudly they insist on their own version of events. Number 2, the silence you kept as a child is the proof against them now. They mistook your quiet for consent. That was mistake number 1. A child who doesn't scream isn't a child who's fine. A child who doesn't scream is a child who has already learned that screaming doesn't change anything, that screaming sometimes makes it worse. You learned that lesson far too early, and you learned it from them. So you went quiet. You became easy. You became the version of yourself that didn't cause problems, didn't ask too many questions, didn't make anyone uncomfortable at the cost of your own comfort. And for years, that silence looked like cooperation. It wasn't. It was documentation. Every unspoken moment was still recorded somewhere inside you, time-stamped, detailed, waiting for the day it would finally matter. Imagine a camera left running in a room everyone assumed was empty. No one thinks to check the footage because no one believes anything was happening in there. Then one day, someone finally presses play, and every detail is exactly where it was left, untouched by the story everyone else agreed to tell instead. That's what your memory has become. Not a grudge, evidence. The versions of the story they've been telling themselves for years, the softened, edited, it wasn't that bad versions, they don't hold up against what you actually carried, what you actually lived through in real time, while everyone around you decided it was easier to look away. And chosen one, here's the part that unsettles them the most. You never needed to raise your voice to prove any of it. Your calm itself became the loudest witness in the room. While they scrambled to explain, minimize, or forget conveniently, you simply stood there, steady, unshaken, remembering with a clarity that made their excuses sound thin and rehearsed, like lines from a script they'd practiced too many times to sound honest anymore. You might wonder why they get so defensive over things they claim never happened. That defensiveness is the tell. Innocent people don't need a script. Silence, when it finally speaks, doesn't need volume. It only needs accuracy. And yours has always been accurate. That's why they're uneasy now, not because you're loud. Because you were never wrong, and there's something else they never planned for. A child who learns to survive on silence often becomes an adult who reads people better than anyone else in the room, who catches the smallest shift in tone, who notices the exact second someone starts rewriting a memory in real time. That skill was forged in the exact rooms they created. They taught you to watch closely because it wasn't safe not to. And now that same watchfulness is the reason none of their revised versions of the story can slip past you unnoticed. Number 3. Why karma waited this long to move. You've probably asked yourself this before, quietly, late at night, staring at a ceiling, wondering why fairness always seems to arrive fashionably late. Why didn't the universe step in back then? Why did it let a child go through that at all? Here's the truth nobody explains well enough. Karma isn't a rescue mission, it's a reckoning. And reckonings need a full picture before they move. It needed to watch the pattern, not the moment. It needed to see whether what happened to you was a mistake made once, or a habit repeated on purpose, dressed up as discipline, as tradition, as, "That's just how things were where I grew up too." It needed to see what they did with the years after, whether they reflected, whether they repeated it on someone else, whether they ever once said the words you deserved to hear and never got. Imagine a judge who refuses to rule until every piece of evidence has been submitted, not because the outcome is unclear, but because the ruling needs to be undeniable when it finally comes, airtight enough that no one, not even the people involved, can talk their way around it later. That's what's been happening this whole time. While you were healing in silence, the case was still open. While you were building a life they never thought you'd have, the file was still growing, quietly, patiently, page by page. Karma wasn't asleep. It was patient in a way that felt, to you, like abandonment, but was actually precision. It waited until you were strong enough to witness the outcome without being destroyed by it. And it waited until they were comfortable enough to believe they'd truly escaped it. That combination, your strength and their comfort, that's the exact moment a reckoning lands hardest. Not too early to be dismissed as coincidence, not too late to be meaningless. Exactly now, exactly when it can finally be understood for what it is. So if you've been quietly frustrated wondering why this took so long, chosen one, let that frustration soften into something closer to trust. Nothing about this timing was cruel. It was calibrated. It arrived the moment it could arrive, with the most clarity attached to it. And clarity, more than speed, is what actually changes anything for good. Number 4. The version of you they tried to erase is the one standing today. They had a version of you in mind, chosen one, a smaller one, a quieter one, a version that stayed exactly as unsure of themselves as they left you. That version was supposed to apologize for existing, supposed to shrink at the first sign of conflict, supposed to keep believing that love and fear were the same thing because that's the only love they ever modeled for you. That version never got to exist for long, not really, even though you performed her for a while just to keep the peace. Somewhere along the way, without permission from anyone, without a plan, without applause, you started rebuilding yourself from pieces they never expected you to find. Imagine a house torn down to its foundation, and everyone assumes nothing usable is left in the rubble. Then someone comes back years later and finds the exact materials needed to build something sturdier than what stood there before. something that doesn't shake the same way in a storm. That's what you did with yourself. You took the coldness they gave you and turned it into boundaries. You took the silence they forced on you and turned it into discernment. You took the fear they planted and turned it into an instinct so sharp it protects you before danger even fully arrives. They didn't build you. They tried to break you. And what's standing here today is what's left after their worst efforts failed completely. That's the part they can't process, chosen one. The child they underestimated didn't just survive. She became someone they don't recognize and can't control. And nothing terrifies people who thrive on control more than watching the person they shaped through harm become someone entirely outside their reach. Someone who no longer needs their approval to feel whole. You might still catch yourself, every once in a while, checking whether you're doing enough, being enough, sitting quietly enough for someone else's comfort. That's the old version trying to resurface out of habit, not because she's still in charge. She isn't. She was simply the version that got you through until you were strong enough to build someone new. And every time you notice that old instinct and choose differently anyway, you prove all over again exactly how far you've traveled from the child they thought they'd shaped for good. Number 5. The ones who stayed silent while it happened are being exposed too. Let's talk about the others, chosen one. The ones who saw, who suspected, who heard things through walls and chose comfort over confrontation. They weren't innocent bystanders. They were quiet participants wearing the costume of neutrality. For years they told themselves they didn't want to get involved, that it wasn't their place, that maybe it wasn't as bad as it looked from where they were standing. That silence protected them, and it cost you. But silence like that has a shelf life, and it's expiring now. As the truth becomes harder to deny, those same people are scrambling to rewrite their role in the story, suddenly remembering concern they never voiced, suddenly claiming they always knew something was off, as if knowing and doing nothing is somehow a form of loyalty to you instead of to comfort. Imagine a group of people watching a house catch fire, doing nothing, standing perfectly still with their hands in their pockets, then rushing forward once the smoke clears to take credit for concern they never once acted on. That's what's happening now. The relatives who changed the subject the second your name came up in the wrong context. The neighbors who looked away. The ones who chose peace at the dinner table over protecting a child at that same table. Their comfort is cracking too, because the truth doesn't only expose the person who caused the harm, it exposes everyone who had the chance to stop it and chose not to. You don't need to chase them down or demand an apology you may never get anyway. Their own conscience is doing that work now, quietly, at 3 in the morning, in moments they can't control and can't explain to anyone around them. That's not your job anymore. That's simply what happens when truth finally gets loud enough to reach every corner of the room, even the corners people worked so hard to stay hidden in. Number 6. Every year that passed added weight to what they owe. They probably thought time was erasing the debt. It wasn't. It was compounding it. Every birthday you spent quietly wishing things had been different. Every milestone you reached without the support a child should have had standing beside them. Every relationship you had to relearn trust inside of, because trust was broken before you even understood what the word meant. All of it added up. Not as bitterness, as evidence, line by line, year by year. Imagine a debt collector who doesn't knock every week, who instead waits patiently while interest builds year after year, decade after decade, until the day they finally show up with a number so large it can no longer be brushed aside or negotiated down. That's what's happening to the people who hurt you. They assumed silence meant the account was closed. It was never closed. It was simply accruing, quietly, in the background of a life they thought they'd left behind them, without consequence. And now, as pieces of the truth surface, as their own choices catch up with them in ways that have nothing to do with you directly, they're beginning to feel a weight they can't quite explain, an unease that follows them into rooms, a heaviness they can't shake, no matter how hard they perform normalcy for everyone still watching. That's the debt arriving. Not because you demanded payment, but because some debts collect themselves whether anyone asks for them to or not. You might notice it in small things first, the way certain relationships in their life keep repeating the same ending, the way certain rooms don't welcome them the way they used to, the way invitations quietly stop arriving. None of that is coincidence. It's simply what happens when a person spends years withdrawing from every account of trust available to them, never once making a deposit back in, and then acts surprised when the balance finally reads 0. Number 7. Why you're calm today unsettles the people who hurt you back then. They expected anger. Anger they could argue with, deny, twist into, see, they're the unstable one, they're the dramatic one, this is why we worried about them. What they didn't expect, what they still can't process, is your calm. You don't scream at family gatherings. You don't chase confrontation. You don't need the last word anymore. You simply exist now, with a steadiness that makes the ground under their old excuses feel unstable instead of solid. Imagine standing in a courtroom expecting a shouting match, and instead watching the other side lay out the truth in a quiet, even voice. No theatrics. No need to convince anyone of anything, because the facts speak clearly enough on their own. That kind of composure is more damning than rage could ever be, because rage can be dismissed as emotional, as unstable, as unreliable. Calm cannot be dismissed that easily. Your calm tells them something they're not ready to hear, that you've already processed what they hoped you'd stay confused about forever, that you no longer need their validation to know what happened was real, that you've moved past needing them to admit it out loud in order to heal from it yourself. That composure is not coldness, it's mastery, earned the hard way, through years they weren't present for. And nothing rattles people who caused harm quite like watching the person they hurt handle the truth better than they themselves ever did. Number 8. The receipts the universe kept without you even asking. You didn't have to keep a folder of evidence, chosen one. You didn't have to record conversations or save messages just in case someone questioned you one day. The universe was already doing that work in ways far more thorough than anything you could have organized yourself with a notebook and a pen. Every dismissed apology, every excuse dressed up as an explanation, every time they told the story wrong to make themselves look better in front of people who didn't know any different. All of it, catalogued, remembered, waiting for the right moment to resurface. Imagine an archive no one knew existed, tucked away in a place no one thought to look, holding every detail exactly as it happened, untouched by the years of revision everyone else agreed to believe, just to keep things comfortable. That archive is opening now, not because you forced it open, but because timing finally aligned the way it always eventually does. The people who minimized what happened to you are starting to run into pieces of the truth they can't control. Comments from people who remember it differently than they'd like. Patterns that keep repeating in ways too obvious to explain away anymore. Consequences that trace back to choices they thought were buried for good. You don't need to produce a single piece of proof yourself. The universe already has the file, and it's finally being read out loud, whether they're ready to hear it or not. There's a strange comfort in that, chosen one, once it settles in. You spent years feeling like you had to be the one to prove it, to remember it perfectly, to say it exactly right so someone would finally believe you. You don't carry that weight anymore. The record was never depending on your performance. It was simply depending on time, and time has never once failed to do its job. Before we go further, chosen one, I need you to stay locked in, because the next part is where all of this starts connecting. If you've made it this far, that tells me something. It tells me you're not here for a distraction. You're here because some part of you already suspected the truth we're laying out today. So take a breath. Let what you've heard so far settle. And if you're ready to see exactly how far this reckoning has already traveled, keep watching, because it's about to get a lot more specific. Number 9. How your healing became the very thing dismantling them. Here's what they never expected, chosen one. Your healing wasn't just for you. It became the loudest indictment against them without you ever raising your voice or writing a single letter demanding accountability. Every time you chose therapy over silence, growth over repetition, boundaries over obligation, you were quietly proving that what happened to you was real enough to require healing from in the first place. People who cause harm depend on their victims staying stuck, confused, unable to name what happened clearly, because confusion protects them far better than any lie ever could. Your clarity destroys that protection completely. Imagine a wound that everyone insisted was never that serious, minor, exaggerated, not that deep, and then watching someone go through actual surgery to fix it. Suddenly, the severity becomes impossible to deny to anyone watching. That's what your healing does. It doesn't just repair you, it exposes the size of what was done to you in the first place, in a way words alone never could. You didn't set out to dismantle their narrative on purpose. You simply refused to stay broken for their comfort. And that refusal alone has been enough to unravel a story they spent years perfecting. Every session you sat through, every hard conversation you had with yourself in the mirror, every boundary you practiced saying out loud until it stopped shaking in your throat, none of that was wasted effort. It was quiet construction work, and the building it produced is standing taller than anything they ever tried to build on top of you. Number 10. The moment their own life started cracking, and they don't know why. You've probably noticed it, chosen one, or heard about it through people who still talk to both sides. Things aren't as steady for them as they used to pretend they were. Relationships that once looked solid are fraying at the edges in ways they can't quite explain to anyone, including themselves. Old patterns they used on you are surfacing in new relationships, and this time, the people around them aren't staying quiet the way you had to as a child, with no options. Opportunities that should have gone smoothly keep hitting friction they can't trace back to any single cause. Imagine a structure built on a foundation with a hidden crack, standing fine for years, but decades even, until stress finally finds that exact weak point and the whole thing starts to shift. That's what's happening now. They're not falling apart because of some external curse someone placed on them. They're experiencing the natural consequence of patterns they never corrected, behaviors they never took responsibility for, harm they never made right when they had the chance to. It caught up quietly, the way most consequences do, not with fireworks, just with things slowly, steadily, refusing to work the way they used to work. And the strangest part for them is they can't trace it back to any single event. It just feels like the ground shifted under them one day. It did. It shifted the moment the truth stopped being something they could contain. You don't have to check in on any of this, chosen one, and you don't have to feel a single ounce of guilt for the peace you feel when you hear about it secondhand. That peace isn't cruelty. It's simply what happens when a person finally stops absorbing chaos that was never theirs to carry in the first place. Watching consequence unfold from a safe distance is not the same as causing it, and you're allowed to exhale when you realize you no longer have to be anywhere near the wreckage to know it's happening exactly the way it was always going to. Number 11. Why the people who once defended them are quietly walking away. There's a specific kind of loneliness that catches up to people who spend years being protected by everyone else's silence. The relatives who used to make excuses for them are running out of excuses to make. The friends who used to say, "That's just how they are, you have to understand their generation," are starting to notice patterns they can't unsee anymore. Especially now that new people in their orbit are experiencing smaller versions of what you experienced as a child behind closed doors. Imagine a circle of people slowly, one by one, stepping back from the center, not with dramatic exits or slammed doors, just quiet distance, fewer calls, shorter visits, less patience for behavior that used to get an automatic pass simply because of a title like parent or elder. That's what's happening now, gradually, undeniably. You don't need to convince a single person of the truth yourself. Time and repeated behavior are doing that work far more effectively than any argument you could ever make at a holiday dinner. The very people who once made you feel like the problem for speaking up are now experiencing, in smaller ways, what it feels like to finally see clearly, without the excuses in the way. And that clarity doesn't come with comfort for them. It comes with distance. And distance from people who used to shield them is its own kind of consequence, one that doesn't need your involvement at all. Number 12. The child they dismissed grew into someone they can't control. This is the part that truly unsettles them, chosen one. It was never really about what happened back then, not entirely, not anymore. It's about what's happening now. The child who was supposed to stay small, easy to manage, easy to dismiss with a raised eyebrow or a change of subject, grew into someone with boundaries they can't talk their way around. Someone with judgment they can't manipulate the way they once could. Someone whose calm can't be provoked into the kind of chaos that used to justify their control over the narrative. Imagine training a young tree to grow bent, believing it will stay that shape forever, because that's how it's always been, only to watch it slowly straighten over time, with sunlight, with space, with room no one gave it permission to have, but it found anyway. That's you, chosen one. They didn't raise someone who would stay obedient out of fear forever. They raised someone who eventually learned that fear wasn't love, and once that lesson landed fully, everything changed for good. They can no longer guilt you into silence with a single look across the room. They can no longer rewrite the story in front of you and expect you to nod along politely like you used to. The version of you they could control simply doesn't exist anymore, and that loss, more than anything else they'll ever admit out loud, is what haunts them the most. Some of them will try one last time to reach for the old version of you, a comment meant to shrink you, a joke meant to put you back in your place, a guilt trip dressed up as concern. Watch how differently those old tools land now. What used to work instantly, silence, obedience, an apology for something that was never your fault. None of it lands the same way anymore. And the moment they feel those old tools fail in their hands, that's the moment they finally understand, deep down, that the child they dismissed is simply gone, and she is never coming back. Number 13. Karma doesn't need your permission or your revenge to move. You never had to plan anything, chosen one. You never had to sit up at night scheming how they'd finally pay for it, drafting confrontations in your head that you'd never actually deliver. That was never your job, and it was never supposed to be. Karma doesn't ask victims to become prosecutors of their own trauma. It simply moves on its own schedule, using consequences that have nothing to do with you directly, using the natural results of choices they made long before you ever grew strong enough to name them out loud to anyone who would listen. Imagine gravity. No one has to remind an object that it will eventually fall. It simply will, because that's how the law works, quietly, consistently, without needing anyone's approval to function. The same is true here. You don't have to lift a finger. You don't have to send a message, confront anyone, or demand anything from people who were never going to give it freely anyway. Whatever consequence lands on their life now is not something you engineered in the shadows. It's something that was always going to happen once enough time passed for the truth to stop being containable behind polite smiles and family photos. Your only job was to survive long enough to witness it, and chosen one, you already did that. You already won that part. So release the pressure of feeling like you need to help karma along, like you need to say the right thing in the right room to make sure it lands. It doesn't need your assistance. It never did. Your only assignment now is to keep living, keep healing, keep choosing yourself, and let the rest move exactly the way it was always going to move without you. Number 14. What happens in their chest when your name comes up now? There's a specific kind of discomfort that settles into people who know, deep down, exactly what they did, even if they've never said it out loud to a single soul. When your name comes up now, in conversations you're not even part of, something in them tightens without warning. Not because you're threatening them in any way, because your existence is a mirror they can't look away from for long, no matter how hard they try to change the subject. Imagine someone hearing a song that used to play during the worst period of their life. Even years later, that song still catches them off guard, still knots something in their stomach they can't fully explain to whoever's standing next to them at the time. That's what your name has become for them. Not a threat, a reminder. A reminder that the story they've told themselves for years doesn't hold up as well as it used to, especially now that you're not the small, quiet, easy-to-dismiss version of yourself anymore, the version they built their comfort around. They don't say this out loud. They probably never will. Not fully, not honestly. But the tension is there every single time someone mentions how well you're doing, how far you've come, how clearly you speak about your own life now without flinching. That tension is the closest thing to accountability some people are ever capable of offering, and right now, it's the only currency they're paying in, whether they realize it or not. You don't need a courtroom apology to feel the shift, chosen one. You don't need them to sit you down and say the words you once believed you couldn't move forward without hearing. That tightness in their chest, every time your name comes up, that's already more truth than they've ever offered anyone about what happened, and it will keep showing up long after this video ends, long after you've stopped thinking about them at all on any given day. Number 15. The pattern finally breaks, and it breaks with you. Here's something worth naming clearly, chosen one, because it matters more than any single consequence landing on the people who hurt you. What happened to you was never an isolated accident. It was a pattern, one that likely stretched back generations before you were even born, passed down like an inheritance nobody asked for, quietly normalized by people who convinced themselves that harm, dressed up as discipline, was simply how things were done. You were supposed to carry that pattern forward without question, the way it was carried to you. Instead, something in you refused. Imagine a river that's been cutting the same path through stone for 100 years, and then one day, without warning, the water simply chooses a new direction, carving somewhere fresh, somewhere it was never supposed to go. That's what you did. You looked at the pattern handed to you, and you said, quietly, without needing anyone's permission, "This ends with me." That decision alone is worth more than any apology you'll never receive. It means the child you once were, the one nobody protected, becomes the reason an entire lineage of harm finally loses its momentum. You didn't just heal yourself, you interrupted something much bigger than yourself. And whether they ever admit it or not, they know it too. They can feel the shift every time they watch you parent differently, love differently, set a boundary they never had the courage to set. That shift terrifies people who built their identity on the old pattern, because it proves, undeniably, that a different way was always possible. They just never chose it. Number 16. Why this is justice finding its own timing, not you seeking revenge. Let's be honest about something, chosen one, because this matters for your own peace as much as anything else in this message. None of what's unfolding needed you to want it, plan it, or even wish for it out loud. That distinction matters. Revenge requires a plan, a target, a moment you orchestrate on purpose. What's happening here is something else entirely, something older, quieter, and far less dependent on your involvement. You didn't have to become someone bitter, someone consumed by what was done to you, someone who spends their energies scripting confrontations that never come. You got to simply live, and living well, living honestly, living with your guard finally lowered around the people who've earned your trust. That in itself became the proof, the consequence, the reckoning, all rolled into one. Imagine two paths laid out in front of a person who's been wronged. One path leads toward spending years plotting a downfall, and the other leads toward quietly building a life so solid, so full, so undeniably good, that the downfall of the person who hurt them becomes almost incidental, a side effect of simply living in alignment with the truth. You chose the second path, even when it was harder, even when a part of you wanted the first one on your worst nights. And that choice is exactly why what's happening now doesn't cost you anything. It's not your revenge playing out. It's simply what always happens eventually when the truth stops being something someone can outrun. You get to watch from a distance, unbothered, because peace was always going to be the better ending. Number 17. Why you don't need their apology to finally be free. There's a version of this story you might still be waiting for. Chosen one, quietly, even after everything you've healed through. A version where they finally sit across from you, look you in the eye, and say the words you needed to hear back when you were small and scared and desperate for someone to simply admit it. Chosen one, it's time to gently release the idea that this moment has to arrive for your healing to be complete. Some people will never apologize, not because the harm wasn't real, but because admitting it would require them to see themselves clearly. And most people who cause that kind of damage have spent a lifetime building elaborate walls, specifically so they never have to look at that reflection. Waiting for an apology from someone who has structured their entire identity around never giving one is like waiting for rain in a place that hasn't seen a cloud in years. It might come eventually. It might never come at all. And chosen one, your freedom cannot be a hostage to their timeline, their conscience, or their willingness to be honest. Imagine holding a door open for years, waiting for someone who told you a long time ago they were never planning to walk through it. At some point, the healthiest thing you can do is close that door gently, not out of anger, but out of self-respect, and start building the rest of the house without them in it. That doesn't mean the truth stops being true. It doesn't mean what happened to you matters any less. It simply means you stop measuring your wholeness by their willingness to acknowledge it. The reckoning we've spent this entire video describing, the consequences, the cracks, the quiet unraveling, that was never meant to replace an apology you deserve and may never get. It was simply proof, undeniable and ongoing, that the universe already knows the truth, even if they never say it out loud. You are allowed to let that be enough. Number 18. You were never broken, you were becoming. This is where we close it. Chosen one, not with anger, not with a demand for anyone's downfall, but with a truth that matters more than any of that ever could. You were never broken. You were becoming, slowly, quietly, through every single year they assumed you'd stay small forever. What happened to you as a child was never your fault, not for 1 second, and nothing that's unfolding now needed your permission to happen the way it's happening. You didn't have to force a single consequence into existence. You simply had to survive, heal, and keep walking forward, and the rest arranged itself the way these things always do eventually, in its own time, on its own terms, far beyond your control, and far beyond theirs. The people who hurt you counted on you forgetting. You remembered everything. They counted on you staying quiet forever. You found your voice anyway, even if it took years longer than it should have. They counted on the story staying theirs to tell however they wanted. It's yours now, and honestly, chosen one, it always was. Whatever is catching up to them today isn't cruelty. It's simply consequence finally arriving on schedule, the way it was always going to. And maybe, chosen one, the most important part of this entire message isn't even about them at all. Maybe it's about the fact that you're still here, still building, still choosing to trust again in small, careful ways, still capable of softness even after everything that tried to take softness away from you. That's not something karma gave you. That's something you rebuilt with your own two hands, quietly, without applause, on days nobody was watching and nobody would have blamed you for giving up. The child who once sat in silence, waiting for someone to notice, waiting for someone to finally say, "This isn't okay," she grew into someone who can say it herself now, clearly, without permission, without flinching. That is the real victory here, bigger than any consequence landing on anyone else's life. You don't have to celebrate it loudly. You don't have to chase it, or confirm it, or explain it to anyone who still doesn't understand, and probably never will. You just have to keep living the life you built out of everything they tried to take from you, because that life, calm, whole, and entirely your own, was always going to be the loudest proof of all. If this message reached the part of you that needed it, drop 77 in the comments, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's still waiting to hear that what happened to them mattered, that it was real, that they weren't imagining it. Thank you for being here, chosen family. Thank you for waiting for us through the silence, and we will see you in the next one. Take care, and goodbye.